I'm Jane Alexander, Nantucket Book Festival alumna, welcoming you to At Home with Authors.
Ruth, first of all, welcome to the Nantucket Book Festival's At Home with Authors.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
The last time we spoke at the Nantucket Book Festival, it was June of 2017. We had discussed your memoir, My Kitchen Year, 136 Recipes That Saved My Life. And you turn your kitchen into a sanctuary, and this was a difficult time in your life. Gourmet magazine, where you were editor-in-chief, had just suddenly closed. Recipes that actually save your life. Tell us about your year in the kitchen as it's been so far during the pandemic, and maybe what we can learn from your way of being in the kitchen.
Well, I mean, the kitchen has always been my happiest place. And in times of trouble, that's what I do. I go into the kitchen. And it's been really interesting because in my normal life, I travel a lot. I'm on the road more than half the time. This is the first time I can remember. We were in LA in March and we suddenly thought, oh my God, what if they close the airports? We were supposed to be there till April. And we just one day packed up everything, ran to the airport. It was March 12th. And I have been here in my house since then. I don't think I've gone more than 20 miles from my kitchen in 7 months. And I'm cooking 3 meals a day, which makes my husband very happy. It's odd because I'm used to cooking for big groups of people. I mean, I normally, people come up and stay with us. We have, in a normal time, if I'm home, I'll have people over every other night. And we have been pretty much alone, just the two of us. And I see the effect on my husband. He's so happy. And it gives me happiness that in this moment when we're frazzled and worried and terrified for the future of this country, the idea that I can bring peace into the house with, the scent of baking bread, the scent of chicken stock burbling away on the stove. It has been wonderful. And I also, early on in the pandemic, we got home and I went to the grocery store and did one giant shopping thinking, okay, maybe I won't get to go to the store for a long time again. And realized that there was no flour. And I got 100 pounds of flour and distributed it to my friends. And I mean, that felt really good. I called people up and said, do you need any flour? And then I sort of left it at the bottom of their driveway. And that felt really good. And I've been connecting to local farmers, and I do almost all of my shopping from local farmers who, have this no-touch way of you tell them what you want, you pay them with Venmo, and they leave it outside in a cooler, and you go by and get it. I'm very cautious because my husband has pre-existing conditions, and so I really don't want to bring this virus home to him. And then, I come home with all of this seasonal produce, and I immerse myself in the kitchen. And for me, the thing that is so healing about the kitchen is if you center yourself in it, if you really just get all the noise away and pay attention to the feel of what you're doing, the scent of what you're doing, the colors of, peeling a peach and seeing that incredible color that's just beneath the skin. The scent of tomato sauce when you're making it. If you let that really come into yourself, you are reminded of what's really important. And I think the thing that has been so hopeful in this moment is those of us who have enough to eat are really aware that of our good fortune. I mean, the hunger that surrounds us is terrifying. And I've been working on a documentary in this time about how this pandemic is changing the food landscape forever. So you said, do you have a setup when we met? And I've sort of created this studio and I Zoom all day with farmers and fishermen and chefs and policy people in the government and anybody who's involved with food, which makes me extremely aware of how terribly broken our food system is and how this pandemic is revealing it. And, I think one of the grace moments in the kitchen is to be really aware of how fortunate you are if in fact you're not hungry at this moment in America, because so many people are. But one of the things that I am really learning in the course of making this documentary, I've been writing about food for 50 years and I thought I knew a lot, and I've just learned so much in the last 7 months, we really in this country have to pay attention to the farmers. We have made farming so difficult in so many different ways. It is stunning that we still have farmers, actually. The average age of the American farmer is 64. The kids don't want to go into it because it's too difficult. Farmers everywhere manage to keep farming by doing other businesses. They're lawyers and accountants, and they work in banks, and they do everything to keep their farms going. And, if there is one essential worker in this country, it is a farmer. And
is there anything you've learned reporting for this documentary that we can now take with us and say, okay, we need to make this happen. Here are the steps we in the public, in the consuming public, can take?
There are so many things, and a lot of it begins with the ballot box. The way that our government supports farmers, who they support, is huge. The Trump administration has given away $50 billion to farmers, and most of it has gone to giant industrial farms, not to small family farmers. Who the Secretary of Agriculture is really important. And that depends on who is in the White House. So that's the first thing is, understand that voting is about food. And the next thing is, we've all been saying it for a long time, but I think it's become increasingly clear during this pandemic. We vote with our dollars, and all of us should be going to farmers markets, to local farms. We should be directly supporting farmers. And one of the things that has been fantastic coming out of this pandemic is that when I first started reporting this in March, small farms were worried that they were going to fail. They had been selling to restaurants and that market was gone. And so many people told me in March, I don't think we'll be here in August. And in fact, what happened is that small farms in communities that could afford it, they don't have enough product. People who had never before shopped at farms started going directly to the farms and getting shares in CSAs. And we need to do more of that.
I wish I could get you to my hometown, Atlanta, Georgia. We have some great farmers markets, I'd say 100-mile radius. The farms come in at the Jimmy Carter, the Carter Center. It's the Freedom Farmers Market. I can tell you the names of my farmers, which is thrilling. I wait for their emails row by row. One of the most wonderful small 5-acre farms with such a bounty. It's a young couple that runs row by row. when I see the demand for this now, it's thrilling actually. And so I guess part of that question is, what can we take from what out of necessity we have learned and how we've adapted during this time to take that into the future when the pandemic is over?
Well, I would say one thing is CSAs are very important in ways that it's not just about you supporting the farm. It's not just about you getting really nice vegetables. It's about you sharing the risk of the farmer. And, almost every farmer in America goes to the bank, hat in hand, at the beginning of the year to ask for operating loans. And a CSA means that they don't have to do that. If they can get enough people to say, okay, I'm going to become your partner, I'll give you $200 or $500 or whatever. And as in the course, I'll give it to you now when you need it to buy your seeds. And in the course of the summer, whatever happens, I'm sharing that risk with you. That is a really important thing for all those of us who can afford it, to go to the farmers that you are buying from at the farmers market and saying, how can I help you now when you don't have any product? What can I do to make your life easier?
I trust my farmer. I trust the farmers I know more than some anonymous conglomerate that might put a stamp on their product. But I trust somebody who tells me, you know what, I'm not certified organic, but here are the methods I use. And that's, oh, okay, I can take that to the bank.
That's another thing that is increasingly important is this whole idea of trust the person rather than the label, because the organic label has become so diluted, it really doesn't matter much. Would you rather get a peach from a farmer down the road as opposed to an organic peach from China that's labeled organic? And the obvious answer is yes, you would rather get it from the farmer that you trust. I think one other thing that is coming out of this pandemic, there's organic farming, and then there's the newest term, which is regenerative farming. And regenerative farming is about soil health. And one of the things that we're really learning is that a carrot is not a carrot. There's a conventional carrot, and then there's a carrot grown regeneratively. That one farmer that I've been talking to on a weekly basis, a regenerative farmer, not an organic farmer, but a regenerative farmer, tested their carrots, and they had 600 times the vitamins and minerals than the USDA mandated amount of nutrition. And what we're starting to learn is that so much of even the conventional vegetables, even of a raw vegetable conventionally grown, may be kind of empty. There may not be much nutrition in it. And one of the reasons to go to a farmer that you trust who has really good farming practices is you're getting more out of that food. And I think it's something we're going to hear more and more about. What you need to ask people is, tell me about the land that you're farming in. And while we're talking about that, one of the other things we have to ask if you really want to be sustainable is who's working your land? How are they being paid? How are they living? Because the really sad truth of farming in America is that it has depended on exploited workers, people who are undocumented and at the mercy of the people who employ them. And so you want to be buying from farmers who are aware of what it really means to be sustainable. And that means paying people a living wage. Out of the 10 lowest paying jobs in America, 8 of them are in food. that's another thing that has been exposed by this pandemic. Is
You're really giving us an incredible picture of just the overall ecosystem, not just the natural ecosystem, but the human ecosystem. You can't tease out these elements. It all works together.
Yes, and that is the point. And we have privileged efficiency over everything else in American food, and we have to stop that. I mean, if we are actually, there's a reason why 6 in 10 Americans have chronic diseases, and almost all of them are food related. We have been feeding ourselves, our children, really badly for the last at least 50 years.
I have to tell you that phrase again, we have privileged efficiency, and we parents know that whenever we put efficiency in parenting over like teaching lessons that really take time, it doesn't work out as well.
No, and more than that, not only with the kids, with ourselves. In parenting, we have this idea of quality time, and that is nonsense. What kids need is time. They don't need quality time. They need time, and they need time enough to be able to ignore you. The pressure of, okay, mom's got an hour now, let's have quality time. It is a pernicious idea. And, one of the things that's happened during this pandemic is that kids have been with their parents. That can only be a good thing.
You talked about, again, efficiency. So right before I got on here, I emailed a farmer friend of mine in Atlanta, Georgia, John Makar, incredibly spirited guy who's always looking for that next regenerative technique. And he texted me, and he loves your work, by the way. And he said, I used to laugh, he said, when my father said he had a hangover after he had bad food, meaning fast food. A hangover. So again, speed and its consequences.
And we have a national hangover. We do. It's so interesting that you're talking about Georgia, because one of the farmers who I've been speaking to on a regular basis is in Georgia, and he's in Bluffton.
Yep. White Oak Pasture.
White Oak Pasture. So I talked to Will Harris. He's like one of the true heroes of American farming.
I'm so glad you are bringing him to a broader stage.
He's one of my true heroes. This is a man who inherited a family farm. His grandfather started this farm. His father started putting pesticides into the land. They started, they did the farming that people did. They used antibiotics with the animals. And in 1993, he said he just looked around and he decided he didn't like what he was seeing. And he decided, to become a regenerative farmer. And he's a real model for what is possible. And they have brought that farm. It's so beautiful and so inspiring. And on top of everything else, what he did, which is one of the things that we really need to think about in America, is he built his own abattoir and packing house. So, one of the problems we're seeing in this pandemic is that all the packing houses have become hotspots because they've become so concentrated. And, 50 years ago, there were small slaughterhouses all over America. And now there are just these giant ones. And Will built his own. And one of the things, and this is something else we have to think about in food, one of the reasons he's so inspiring was he brought his town back to life. Bluffton was dying. There was nobody there. There were no stores. There were no anything. And it is now a thriving community, and partly because he's got 160 people working on the farm.
So, urgent question. We want restaurants to survive. We're heading into the cold weather. We've been able to do some outdoor dining over the summer. There's an urgent situation. Restaurants need to adapt to be able to serve people in the cold, and we need to know that we can be comfortable in the cold. In your life experience, is there some great story that you have in your history of eating out that tells us, if we can duplicate this restaurant, what this restaurant does in the cold, we can save a lot of restaurants?
No. I'm sorry to tell you that, we are speaking on the day after. At this time yesterday, there was hope that the government was going to bail restaurants out. They were part of the House approved bill. And so yesterday, when I was talking to chefs and restaurateurs, everybody was very optimistic that things were going to get good, that they were going to be able to make it through the winter. And that got shot down. There is not going to be a bill until after the election. And that pretty much means that a lot of independent restaurants are not going to make it. There is no way people want to eat outdoors in the snow. There just isn't. And, even getting enough heaters, et cetera, to make it through the fall is enormously expensive. Most restaurants that, we're excluding fast food here, but the independent restaurants that are still open, if they're lucky, they're breaking even. There are one or two restaurants that have such genius business people that they're doing well. But for the most part, restaurants are staying open to actually give people work. And if they're not losing money, the owners are happy. That's not sustainable. And being open at 25%, like they are in New York, you can open your restaurant at 25% inside. There's no way that you do anything but lose money at that rate. There's just no way to make that, a restaurant can seat 100 now has 25 people, but you still have, to open up, you've got to staff up. And there's no way you don't lose money at that. And we all knew going into this pandemic that it was going to be really hard on restaurants. I don't think anybody anticipated that 7 months later, we would still be, we would see no light at the end of this tunnel. And it's very clear now that a lot of restaurants are going to fail. There's no question. A lot of these small restaurants that I speak to are, owned by immigrants who say, we're immigrants. We're used to starting from scratch. We'll get through this. But a lot of people are not going to get through this. Yesterday when this restaurant bill went down, I just was a really bad moment for food in America. Yeah. And let me also talk about a system. Yeah. It's not just, restaurants are bad, but, you think about all the people who depend on restaurants. You're talking about fishermen. 85% of the seafood eaten in America is eaten in restaurants. Americans don't tend to cook very much seafood at home. So it's a disaster for fishermen, for lobstermen, for the cheese people. Cheese is, very dependent on restaurants. This has been terrible for, the artisanal cheese movement. And then you think about, the florists who depend on restaurants. Everything is so interwoven, and, the failure of restaurants it ripples out in terrifying ways.
It's tough because we called you initially because a lot of us are experiencing this joy in this protected space and bringing peace into our homes.
I went to a dark place. I'm sorry.
But you've just given me that concept, first of all, bringing peace into your home, which brings me full circle back to your personal story. And you shared it with us last time in Nantucket about growing up with a mother who suffered from bipolar disorder and how that played out and signaled to you in the food that you saw in the refrigerator. And I thought, if there's any kind of unsettling feeling for a child, it must have been not knowing if your parent, who was the source of peace in your house, not knowing if one day that person was going to be manic or depressed. And you've been through that and you survived it and you figured out how to use the kitchen as a sanctuary. So I don't know what my question is, but you've sort of been through the battlefield within your own home. So
yeah, well, I think everybody has, I mean, the truth is everybody's story is really interesting when you get to know people. I mean, there are no boring people. And, I think my lesson from my mother, and my childhood was really difficult because growing up with a severely mentally ill parent is really challenging, but it made me strong. It can destroy you or it can make you strong. And I was lucky that I came to depend on myself at a very young age. And I think that, the lesson for this pandemic is it is a tough time for all of us. And it's a moment to use your inner resources, to trust yourself, to tell yourself that you are sane, to do everything you can to make yourself happy and those around you happy. And, to bring it back to the kitchen, for me, that means going into the kitchen a lot. And every time I feel, really pulled down by what's going on around us, by the sheer nastiness of this moment in time, to go into the kitchen and cook something, to maybe make a batch of cookies and leave it for a neighbor, to try and emphasize the positive. And, I don't think cooking is everybody's joy. So, maybe for you, it's going out into the garden. Maybe it's taking a walk. But in this moment, it really behooves all of us to be grateful that we are able to experience joy and to know what it is that makes us happy. Maybe it's music, maybe whatever it is, do that thing, trust yourself, and understand that it is really your responsibility to take as much happiness as you can out of life, because your happiness only spreads out into the world and makes the world a better place.
thank you for taking us down into the dark place, but lifting us up too. It means more when you've seen the darkness.
I'm sorry, I did not mean to go to the dark place, and I'm so consumed with this at the moment. But the truth is that I speak to people who are in a really bad place every day, and I also go into the kitchen every day, and actually, go to farms every day, and from a distance talk to my farmers. And I do think it's really important for those of us who are fortunate enough to be safe and secure and healthy in this terrible time, to do as much as we can to help those who aren't. And, part of that is just by staying as sane as you possibly can.
Ruth Reichl, thank you so much for joining us on the Nantucket Book Festival's At Home with Authors.
Thank you. This has been a pleasure.